Okay, we're going to start with judge introductions. As a reminder to the judges not to talk about any university affiliation because this is an unbiased, blind judging panel. Would you like to go ahead and start? Give us a little bit of an introduction about yourself.
Thank you. So my name is Robert Bittner. This is my 8th year doing this. I also do a lot of mentoring and tutoring. I'm quite a Renaissance man, but I did spend 35 years designing and building communication satellites. And that's what you'd expect from an economics and statistics major. I also have a master's in business, and I'm really thrilled to be here.
We're thrilled to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
I'm Michelle. I'm a financial analyst. This is my 3rd year doing this, and most of my background is in the music industry, so very different.
I'm Kendra Jones. I'm Chief Legal and Sustainability Officer for Epson America. They're a global printer projector company. I'm looking around. I don't see any in the room at the moment. But I have both a law degree and an MBA, and I've worked in technology my whole career, starting at Western Digital in hard drives.
Cool.
And I am still working, so it's great to have a day out of the office.
That is.
And I guess let's go ahead and get started. It's let's say it's 5 after, so you guys have 25 minutes, and I'll try to give you a heads up getting close.
Perfect.
So,
Thank you.
all right.
Oh, and I think you need to tell us who we are for your audience.
Yes.
Okay.
Certainly.
So you are the board of directors for Mahindra Life Spaces Developer, and we'll get into a bit more on what that entails in a second.
Yeah.
Good morning, Mahindra executives. I'm Adriana Timmons.
I'm Brayden Marshall.
And I'm Riley Pearl.
And we are Citadel Consulting. And we're excited to speak with you today about how you can pour pollution back into cities and create concrete solutions for carbon capture.
So what will we cover for you today? We will first provide you with some background analysis on the current situation before we provide further analysis on the issue and the stakeholders and our alternatives. From here, we will recommend our solution for your company, and then we will show you the detailed plan to successfully implement this. And then from here, we will analyze the legal and ethical components of this plan. First, let's get into the context.
So who are you, Mahindra? You're a leading real estate developer located in India with over 14.5 million square feet of projects currently underway. This square footage is spread across 49 different projects in 9 different cities, meaning you have a nationwide presence. You also have a very strong ethos of sustainability and ethics, which we can see represented in your over 80 awards for ESG initiatives and other projects. And this is never more clear than in your mission statement. You don't just want to build spaces, you want to bring them alive. And this is by focusing not just on the profit of your developments, but also on the people and planet you're affecting with everything you build.
So we understand that your vision is to enable 1 million people to live, smile, and prosper by 2026. And in order to achieve this goal, you plan to build residential homes, cities, and industrial parks.
We also recognize that when you make a decision, you heavily consider your values. You're a very ethics-centric organization who looks at doing business for a larger social purpose, and you consider the people and communities in which you serve.
And a little more on these people. So India's population is experiencing significant growth. You just surpassed China as the most populated country in the world, and you're expected to continue this upward trajectory and hit 1.7 billion people by 2050. And many charitable organizations have already identified a housing shortfall, meaning as your population increases, this is only projected to get worse.
Now, to cope with this demand, you are increasing the use of cement you use in your developments. In 2021, we hit a record high of 351 million tons of cement used. Now, 50% of this demand is derived from the building and construction sector. And this contributes greatly to global emissions, as 8% of emissions can be traced back to the cement or cement making process.
And India is no stranger to carbon emissions, ranking 3rd in the highest carbon emissions per country in the world.
Your country has doubled its emissions since the year 2000.
And people within India are feeling these effects. 42 of the 50 cities with the worst air quality in the world are located within India.
And this can be directly traced back to cement. For every 1 ton of cement used, that's 1 ton of CO2 emissions produced. And if we think back to that record number of 351 million tons used in 2021, that was an additional 351 million tons of CO2 produced in India alone.
So now we're faced with a dilemma. Do we continue to meet the demand of the growing population to build them residential housing and developments, or do we align with our values and scale back production to combat the emissions that we're putting into the atmosphere?
So this brings us to the situation at hand. How are you, Mahindra, going to strategically shift your development in order to not just honor your sustainability focus, but remain a leader in the real estate development industry?
Now we have two key issues. One is that concrete is a primary building material, but it's a major source of CO2 emissions. Now on the other hand, you need to keep building to meet the demands of people who deserve housing in this growing population. Now our strategy combats both of these issues. We're going to adopt an alternative building material that uses carbon injection technology, and we're going to do this by partnering with a firm who already has carbon capture injection technology underway. That way you do not have to use your R&D funds or invest heavily to get it off the ground and can rather focus on implementation straight away.
And what is the impact of this? Not only will you be able to meet this growing demand and provide housing for those who need it, but you'll also be able to do this sustainably and in a way that aligns with your ethics and sustainability ethos. And not just this, but there are financial benefits as well. We project $5 million in current savings by adopting this technology due to a 5% reduction in all the costs associated with the key input of cement. And this will help differentiate you in a highly fragmented Indian real estate market. So, a little more on cement. Cement is a key ingredient used in the production of hard concrete, and it's used due to its versatility and reliability as a building material. It's easily mixed and has high compressive strength. However, what it doesn't do is it's not a sustainable building material due to its high carbon emissions and its overall high carbon footprint. And also, it isn't necessarily the best option structurally.
So this creates an immediate need for a more sustainable concrete option for you, Mahindra. But what is this option?
So our solution solves all the issues that Brayden previously mentioned. It's more sustainable, it will reduce your company's carbon footprint and reduce overall emissions in the Indian atmosphere, and it's a more durable material due to its high compressive strength and its low curing time.
So we understand that with every decision that you make, you must consider your stakeholders. These are your investors, your government, your competitors, your employees, and your suppliers. But at the forefront of any decision that you make are your key stakeholders, whose needs you must address directly. These are the citizens of India, the environment, your property owners, and these regulatory bodies. So how do you address these needs of these stakeholders while staying true to your core values?
Our solution targets two key SDGs, SDG number 9, Innovation, Industry, and Infrastructure. And by implementing carbon injection technology, you will not only be fostering innovation, but creating more sustainable industrialization and urbanization. And now SDG number 11 is Sustainable Cities and Communities. And as you continue to build with carbon injection technology, you will be directly helping to build more resilient and sustainable cities. So how can Mahindra strategically shift its development practices to meet the demands of a growing population while staying true to their sustainability values and maintaining their position as an industry leader?
Well, to answer this question, we did our due diligence and considered several alternatives that would fit the needs of Mahindra. So the first would be to continue as usual and not make any changes to our current development practices. The second would be to build less. By building less, we're going to be reducing our carbon emissions. Then we considered several biomaterial alternatives to concrete that had lower carbon footprint and emissions, before finally landing on our solution, which is carbon capture technologies. And we did this through looking to your vision and values. We based our 4 critical success factors for each project on your existing vision and values. The first 2 being how sustainable the project would be for the long term for Mahindra, before we looked at any ethical implications of adopting the strategy. Then we considered the product durability, so whether or not our projects would continue to be strong and quality for our buyers. And then finally, we looked at, of course, because you're a business, the profitability of the project, because we wanted something to be cost effective and profitable for you. And as you can see, carbon capture scored the highest across all 4 of these critical success factors, making it the solution we're going to present to you today.
So as Brayden alluded to, we present to you our solution, carbon capture and injection technology. But what exactly is it and how does it work?
So, to get a little sciencey, the carbon capture technology happens when we take the emissions directly from the atmosphere and using specialized technology boxes, we inject them into liquid concrete. This then traps the emissions permanently inside the concrete as it hardens, making sure they'll never escape into the atmosphere again. But how does this look from an operational standpoint for a company like you? So these injection boxes can be attached as long as the concrete is still liquid. So we recommend you attach them to your mixing trucks in order to inject it while it's still liquid before it's poured onto your sites.
So why are we recommending that you do this physically yourself on site instead of buying carbon injected cement from a supplier? So there's actually a 1% surcharge on cement on average when you buy it directly from the supplier. And not only this, but as we see carbon taxes begin to increase or become more prevalent, it's likely that this surcharge will increase. So from a financial standpoint, it's likely better to buy the technology upfront and know that you're not going to have to worry about any surcharges in the future. Not only that, but it's a little bit more secure as you mitigate the risk that there will be dishonesty with suppliers when you buy this cement, and there's less monitoring costs.
And there are several other advantages just from the carbon capture process. The first and most obvious being that it permanently locks away these emissions and reduces your overall carbon emissions. But also this process lends to a more durable product with higher compressive strength. This means you're able to build larger builds, and it also has a faster curing time, meaning larger builds in less time. In this way, we're not going to be compromising on product quality by choosing a sustainable option.
So by using carbon-injected concrete, for every cubic yard of concrete that you produce, you'll be reducing your emissions by 15 to 25 pounds of CO2. So if we correlate this to an average building that you build, this will reduce your emissions by 680 metric tons of CO2.
So this brings us to our recommendation for you, the Set in Stone strategy, which is a partnership with Carbon Cure Technologies. So why do we select Carbon Cure as your potential partner in this endeavor? Carbon Cure is a leader in the carbon-injected concrete field, and it has a proven track record of success around the world. Now, there is a notable lack of representation in Western Asia, so they're actively seeking to enter new markets, and they make you a perfect partner. So let's break down the strategy a little bit further to see exactly what it entails. This is a partnership, and the first step, of course, is going to be acquiring the necessary materials. So we suggest that you invest some of your allocated R&D funds towards buying this technology. So it's important to note that within your financial statements, you noted that 200 million rupees were going towards developing sustainable building material alternatives. Now, this was only a portion of your R&D budget. We suggest taking 163 million rupees, around 82%, and using this to just buy the technology instead. Second, you're going to have to communicate this change to your suppliers to let them know that you are adopting this technology and that there's going to be an extra step on the development site. And you're going to begin using this sustainable concrete in all your future builds to build greener buildings. Now, there's several key advantages to this. The first is that it aligns very well ethically, as you've stated numerous times in your sustainability statements and your financial statements that you're a very sustainability-focused and oriented organization. Now, it also has relatively low implementation costs. You budgeted $200 million to develop technology just like this. Instead, let's buy it for $163 million. You can also build larger projects. Like we said, there's a lot of structural benefits to a carbon-injected concrete. And lastly, it gives you a competitive advantage as you would be one of the first developers within your region to implement carbon injection technology.
But like any project, there are some inherent risks to this that we want to highlight and how you can mitigate them. So the first being, what happens if Carbon Cure rejects the partnership?
While that is a potential scenario, it is highly unlikely. As Adriana mentioned, Carbon Cure is a leader in this industry, and they are eager to gain foothold in new markets, and they have not tapped into the Indian market yet.
And what happens if our suppliers or our employees are misusing technology, thereby reducing the potential gains?
Certainly. As a company, Mahindra, you already do a tremendous job of conducting annual audits on all of your suppliers, so this will not require any additional monitoring, but just to continue maintaining those levels. As well, by selecting Carbon Cure, they have excellent transition training and education to work directly with you and your employees to help you make that transition.
And what if the suppliers are resistant to adopting this new technology?
Certainly. By you investing in the technology yourself, this reduces a lot of the financial resistance from suppliers having to invest in this technology using their own money. We're also going to ensure that this is reflected in your contracts so that suppliers are aware that this is a new thing moving forward.
So how do we go about implementing the Set in Stone strategy? we've identified 3 key pillars to the implementation. The first being the negotiation of the purchase with CarbonCure. We suggest beginning with 3 of the injector boxes, but we also want to highlight that you want to be working with them going forward. So we want to work closely with CarbonCure to figure out a future purchase plan of how to best suit Mahindra's growing needs. We also want to communicate this early to our suppliers and our employees. We want them to be at the forefront of any changes we're making to our processes. And then finally, we want to continue monitoring the status with our annual audits, but we also want to promote these changes to our consumers and future buyers. We want them to know they're living in green and carbon reducing buildings.
So what does this look like over time? In Q3 of this year, we are going to contact CarbonCure regarding an initial partnership in that we are looking to buy their carbon injection boxes. In the next quarter, we're going to finalize a contract with CarbonCure and notify suppliers that there is an incoming change that is going to occur. Now, early in 2025, we're going to educate suppliers and our employees on what the carbon injection technology is and how to use it on site. It's going to be your employees that are facilitating the carbon injection on your development sites, so it's really important that they have a firm grasp on what exactly the process entails. In mid-2025, we are going to start using those 3 boxes across your development sites, and we have an end goal of, in 2028, you being 100% adopted to the carbon injection technology process.
So, this all sounds great, but I'm sure you're wondering what this costs for your company, and is it worth it financially?
So as Adriana mentioned, you've already identified a $200 million R&D budget to develop the alternative building materials that reduce carbon emissions in-house. We suggest taking only a portion of this to 83% of the R&D to cover the cost of 3 of these injection boxes, and since we are retaining ownership, we'll be able to use them across various developments. But not only will this cost you money, it'll also save you money. How the carbon capture process works is we get the same amount of concrete by using less cement. So think of it, we're getting the same size cake using 1 less egg. So this allows us to cut down our cement usage by 5% and all the associated costs.
So let's put this into numbers that are currently relevant for you. You've stated that you have almost 4.5 million square feet, 14.5 million square feet of projects underway. And using traditional cement, this would require almost 15 million cubic yards. However, with that 5% reduction, we see almost 100,000 less cement that is needed for this carbon capture technology. Now, this realizes into over $5 million in current savings for your company if this were to be adopted immediately.
So, what does this really mean for you, Mahindra? The savings are huge. For every square foot of cement and concrete buildings that you build, you'll be saving 40 cents. This is huge when you consider your annual production.
So now that we understand the financial benefits of our recommendation, let's get into the legal and ethical implications. So first, on the macro countrywide level, India did sign on to the 2016 Paris Agreement, which is a legally binding international treaty that stipulates that emissions must be lowered by a certain GDP intensity to emissions ratio. Now, you do not have an ethical obligation, you do not have an obligation necessarily legally to partake and assist your country in reducing its emissions. However, as a company who has stated they're very sustainability oriented, it would align ethically with you, and you do have an ethical obligation as a company who is sustainability oriented to assist your country by adopting this technology in reducing emissions.
And then to dive down a little bit more to the day-to-day operational levels. So due to the faster curing time, we're going to be able to actually better meet deadlines and better meet any contractual obligations for our future developments. Also, as you've identified due to the Paris Accord and in your annual report, you're expecting carbon taxation in India to be coming soon. So by reducing your emissions now, you'll be able to be in compliance with any future regulatory action, as well as take advantage of any future policies or carbon credit programs. As well, you have a fiduciary duty now that you know there is a more sustainable option to provide a duty of care for any future buyers and citizens around your developments. But not only this, there is already litigation related to climate change happening within India. You currently rank 10th in the number of cumulative cases of climate action against public and private bodies in the world per the UN. This climate change litigation overall has doubled since 2017 and is only expected to increase. There's also precedents in nearby countries of cement companies being targeted, as well as other construction companies. And finally, and most importantly, you're one of 6 jurisdictions in the world that has precedents of failure to adapt cases. These are cases where if you are aware of a possible better alternative and you didn't use it, which caused negative environmental harms, you could face exposure to litigation.
Now, at the intersection of the legal and ethical components, we can look at the National Building Code of India. So there's 3 key components: the ethical, the efficiency in construction, and the structural integrity and safety of buildings. It's important to note that as a developer who is active in the building space, you currently adhere to all the National Building Code criteria. However, now that you're aware of carbon injection technology, which is not only more sustainable as it captures those emissions, but more efficient due to its lower curing time, and more structurally secure due to its higher compressive strength, you have the option to better adhere to these policies and an ethical obligation to do so.
So that brings us back to our ethical dilemma that we started with. How are we able to meet the needs and demand of this growing population while building sustainably as per our sustainability and ethical ethos?
While you may think you have an ethical dilemma, there is only an ethical solution, Mahindra, and the solution is carbon capture and injection technology. That is to sustainably meet the demands for more Indians and stimulate business growth by leveraging your core values.
So that brings us back to, how is Mahindra able to strategically shift its development practices to face the demand of a growing population and honor its sustainability focus? And this is easy. There's only one ethical solution. We're going to adopt carbon injection technology by leveraging a partnership with an existing pioneer in this field. This will have massive benefits both financially and ethically for our organization.
So with this, we implore you to implement carbon capture and injection technology now to continue being a leader in sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you.
The timing was perfect.
Okay, this clicker,
Yeah.
this clicker really.
You guys did an amazing job.
Okay, we were a lot quicker before, but this clicker,
Oh,
you have to point it right
fantastic.
on.
I mean, it only took 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent.
So, yeah, great.
I'm
So
sorry, I thought that was your 1 minute one.
Well, it was getting
Okay.
close. Yeah, I was like, 5 minutes, but you're doing great. So, judges, questions.
Oh, I'm just going to start, as you guys have pointed out, and we're very proud of. We are one of the leading companies in ethical and sustainable solutions as it is. And I would need to go back and do some more math maybe, but it looks like this is a minimal impact of profitability. And so when I look at the implementation cost of anything, does it really matter if we do nothing? Relative to our business plan and the returns of our investors.
That's a
Okay.
great question. So we want to consider your key stakeholders in this as well. So you're not just your investors, but also the people being affected by your developments directly. And as you can see, carbon emissions are one of the highest sources of environmental harm caused by building and construction companies. So if we do not begin targeting these, and you've already made strides in this effort, this is a simple solution to expand upon your existing strategies and reach your goals of net zero buildings by 2030 and any further reduced emissions goals by 2040.
So quick follow-up then, as you mentioned, within the construction industry, and I can envision why it's such a large contributor of pollutants. But within the country of India, isn't this undesirable product an actual very small percentage of the pollution issues that you mentioned the country as a whole has?
So yeah, we can translate it. It is probably about 8% of India. So that is a fairly significant amount when you're thinking from a business standpoint. And it's also important to consider that, when you're building, we know that we already want to have injection technology or some building material alternative. So where you've already, designated that within your financial reporting, we think that this is the best option because we're financially, decreasing that strain on you from the 200 million rupees to the 163. So, you want that technology, Indians want that technology because it does have an impact of about 8%. So overall, it is significant and it's a step in the right direction for your 2030 net zero goal.
And just to add on to that, another great thing about this technology is unlike a lot of different carbon capture alternatives that a lot of companies are undertaking and developing, this technology actually permanently locks away these carbon emissions. It actually becomes one with the concrete. So even if we're destroying our buildings or they're being demolished, we have no risk of these emissions escaping again, which is a big risk with a lot of different carbon capture technologies.
Yeah. So I have a couple questions. If we can just kind of tag on to the financial side of things. So when you initially said the investment, it was in rupees, but then when you were saying how much we'd be saving, it was appeared to be US dollars. So could you kind of put that all in one context? Like what would be the USD as opposed to rupees initial investment? I think it was like 183 million rupees.
Yeah, so each box they average from 450 to 650 US dollars. So to be on the safe side, we went at the higher end of things. So that's $650 for the 3 boxes. So it's 650,000 US dollars. So it's 1.95 million is 163,000.
Okay.
The conversion from rupees to USD is about times 65. So if you wanted to do 5 million times 65, my mental math's not that good, but that would get you to.
Yeah, and we also wanted to just highlight that Carbon Cure is a Canadian company, so their costs are generally in Canadian dollars. And Mahindra is an Indian company, but we want to be able to reflect better for numbers that made more sense for a US-based representative of the company.
Yeah.
So we want to acknowledge that there is likely fluctuations due to exchange rates.
But those were US dollars, not
Yes,
not
those
Canadian.
are US
Okay.
dollars.
Certainly.
And then my other question is, so how do they like actually capture the CO2 to kind of lock it in the box that you then inject into the concrete?
So what's really cool so Carbon Cure is leading in this field. So they developed the box, it attaches directly to the trucks, or you can even use it at a supplier plant, but we would be using it at the trucks. And it takes it directly from the atmosphere and tracks it and reports it back to both the company and Carbon Cure's database in order to accurately record the amount of CO2, because it has to be a precise amount to ensure the structural integrity of the concrete. So it does it all within the technology, and it connects to any existing databases that you have as a company quite easily. They want to ensure that it's as easy as possible to adapt to reduce any potential barriers and education barriers for companies that are looking to reduce their emissions. So it's all developed and ready to go once it arrives, and it takes it from the atmosphere, injects it in a controlled amount, and tracks it and reports it back to you.
Most people, when they think of carbon injection technology, they picture cement like looking like an Aero chocolate bar with a bunch of bubbles in it. But really, there's a complex chemical reaction that happens, and that's how we get that faster curing time and that higher compressive strength, is because it actually changes the molecular bonds within the concrete, and that's how it gets stronger.
So it's pulling from the air right on site at the side of the box.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
We're pulling from stored CO2. If I understand you, the stored CO2 is in a vessel of some sort, the way you showed it, and that the concrete is the current state that we make it, and then you are injecting the stored CO2 into the concrete
During mixing.
during
Yes.
the mix right before use.
Yeah, so it's very easy. It doesn't require any additional steps. Just add it during the mixing, and it's the exact same process otherwise. It just makes a better product, and it reduces your emissions.
Yeah, and
So how long do these boxes, like what is the lifespan of these boxes? Like do they have a limited use? Do you have to have filters or anything?
They're quite a new technology, so the long term, it's estimated they'll last quite a long time due to the quite simple mechanics, and they attach very easily, so there's not going to be as much wear and tear. They pride themselves on their ease of connection to any carbon suppliers or developers, so we don't have to worry so much about the wear and tear. It's a quite simple connection, but it's estimated we'll be able to use them up until those 2040 deadlines at the very least, if not more. But we want to be a bit more conservative and build out a potential long-term purchase plan in case we do need to replace them going forward.
Final question, the 5 million, that was per year or like per annum or just over a longer period of
So
time?
that was
Because of the developments and the nature of the development field, it's hard to project long term because we don't know what your future projects are going to look like necessarily. So that is with the 14.5 million square feet of projects that are currently or upcoming that Mahindra has taken on. So we're estimating within probably the next 2 to 3 years for finishing of all those products. But if you were to implement it immediately, that would be the 5 million.
Yeah,
Good, thank you.
it's just based on your current and undergoing projects.
But when you cited implementation costs, does that also you showed a truck, which was a great graphic, and you showed a tank of CO2 that we shouldn't breathe from. But so is all the implementation, I mean, there's gotta be adaptation to the truck or whatever that's gonna let us inject this and get it mixed in. So are all those costs folded in to your expense and projected return?
That's a great question. So Carbon Cure, one of their priorities when developing this technology was to reduce barriers such as that. They want to acknowledge that all suppliers have different means and technologies. So that's part of their onboarding process, and generally it's just as easy as hooking it up to your mixing truck or your supply plant. It's a very simple process meant to ease any of those concerns regarding any adapters or
So the
technologies.
total, you gave us total implementation,
Certainly.
not just
Yes.
Yes.
buying into this.
Yeah.
And one other quick question, as you guys mentioned, of course, there is more pressure to do the right environmental things around the world. So separate from what you stated there, or you can tell me if you folded it in.
Yeah.
Are there any government subsidies or tax breaks that you see coming because we would do this?
So there's actually
Yeah.
an Indian Green Building Code, so it's a subsidiary basically of the National Building Code Enforcement Policy, and they started in actually 2001, so a long time ago, but they will actually analyze building sites and your building plans, and if you are taking environmental steps, they actually will offer subsidies for your buildings and your developments. However, if they realize that you're doing something that is potentially extremely harmful for the environment, they will tax you or offer you, fine you. So there is that right away, and there's also the potential of carbon credits becoming available within India. We're seeing other countries around the world who have signed on to the Paris Agreement who are a little bit quicker in this process, but it's looming for India, as you guys recognized in your financial statements. So that is potentially a possibility as well.
So the potential gains of that are not included yet in
No,
any
that
of
would be
this?
additional.
Okay.
I think related to that, do you think introducing this technology and adopting it would actually help us win bids? Do you think that, is our competition doing something similar, or would we really stand out from the competition if we had adopted this kind of technology?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So looking at Mahindra as a company, you have already positioned yourself in the market as a leader in sustainability when it comes to your builds. But no one in India is currently using injection technology, and as Carbon Cure is a leader in this field and the most established and developed in terms of scale, since they have no presence in this area, you would be among the first to adopt it in a larger capacity. So doing this, you'd be able to not only highlight the environmental friendliness of your builds, but due to the better product quality, you'll also be able to highlight that you have better buildings that are going to require less maintenance, less repairs, and have better structural integrity, which will reduce costs.
So you think it will help us?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
it'll
will.
certainly help
Yeah.
you win bids.
Yeah.
It's an extremely fragmented market. The top 10
Yeah.
development companies only have 26% of the market share, so this can really help you differentiate yourself and should definitely help get builds for those, greener marketing.
Yeah, and in certain neighboring countries, they have been the first to adopt Carbon Cure, and they have proven case studies and track records that it's really helped set them aside from their competitors. So we feel it'll do the same.
And
for
how
you.
long has Carbon Cure been around? Is this technology still relatively new, or has it been pretty well proven?
So the technology itself of carbon capture in concrete has been around for quite a while, but Carbon Cure is the first to actually make it into a marketable and applicable to a larger scale. So they're the first to have wide market adoption of the technology. So while the technology has been proven for a very long time, they're the first to be able to effectively apply it in recent years. They've been around for about 12, 15 years now, and they've won several awards for this and have large backers and different investments.
So you've done some diligence on them, and they haven't been involved in any legal or ethical lawsuits or anything like that?
No.
Do they have, you touched on it, it sounds like maybe the answer is no, but if something were to happen to Carbon Cure and they, any business is at risk of going sideways, are there competitors that could step in, or should we consider a dual source program so that we don't kind of have so much, banking on the success of Carbon Cure?
So while Carbon Cure is obviously the largest firm, as we've mentioned, that there is already beginning to become a market for carbon-injected concrete, as we mentioned, with those surcharges that are becoming more prevalent in other parts of the world, not yet India. So while we recommend initially partnering with Carbon Cure, we expect due to their success and the technology becoming more common throughout the world that there will be other firms who will be becoming into maturity in future years. So even if Carbon Cure were to experience any difficulties that would reduce their ability to do, say, maintenance or tracking of our technology, we do think in the coming years there will be other options in this technology, so we will still be able to use it.
As if we were to engage with Carbon Cure, what percentage of their business or revenues do we become?
We will still remain a relatively a medium-sized firm in terms of the scale of the firms they've adopted, because they have worked with some Fortune 500 companies, but they've also worked with some very small local leaders in their area.
Okay, but if you take what we would need to implement, if you take that and you compare it to what Carbon Cure is currently under no contract for, what percentage of their revenues do we become? Are we now half of their business? Are we 10%?
We would be under,
Beginning.
we would be under 10% because they are still quite a large company.
Yeah.
We don't have exact numbers, but we
Yeah.
estimate it's probably like below 5%.
We think they can scale then to support.
Yeah,
revenues.
especially in-
Well,
Yeah.
one is scalability,
Yeah.
and then
Certainly.
the other
Yeah.
is our influence and where they may go with next generation developments and stuff. If we're a larger percentage of their revenue stream,
Certainly.
we may be able to tailor or have other influence
Right.
on what they provide to us in the future, given that they know they're making this much money off us every year.
Certainly. Yeah. In purchasing the 3 boxes up front, you would definitely have a small percentage of that. But as we said, we hope to have 100% adoption, but we don't have exact numbers on your plans for your building projects,
Well, even just,
depending on
even
those
just
size.
as you said, the firm, the stuff
Yeah.
we know about.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we can certainly leverage that we're the first in Western Asia,
Yeah.
so that should be a point of leverage for us that they're entering this new market with our
And that hits, great segue to my last question is, so does this require them to do the CO2 capture in India, or are they doing it at their facilities and then it has to get, I'm assuming, shipped to India?
It's actually, so the way the technology works is they ship the initial boxes, but that carbon is pulled directly from the atmosphere on site. So either shortly
Okay.
before it's poured or as it's being injected in.
So the process of getting the CO2 is done within India?
Yes.
Yeah. Very
Okay.
simple.
You alluded to this a little bit, I think, when you said, is there any risk of, I guess, dishonesty in the implementation of this technology? Because you can see a situation where somebody's saying they're doing this and they're not actually doing it. And I think we've seen that in the world of even carbon offset credits.
Exactly.
And, people are selling credits 3 times to
Yeah.
different companies. And so kind of what is the best way to mitigate that risk to ensure that we don't have any dishonesty in our process?
So that's why we wanted to target specifically like Mahindra doing it, because we know that our company has a very strong ethos of sustainability. We didn't want to buy it from a supplier who would have more incentive to potentially lie and pocket that 1% surcharge that they're charging for the additional effort of putting in the carbon technology. So our goal with this was really to make sure that everything was as within Mahindra as it could be, and that we were facilitating all that we could, because we know our employees have a fairly strong sustainability ethos. But that's what we're also doing with the educational component of it that Carbon Cure offers. They have a wealth of information, not only on how to use the technology, but its benefits. So if we educate really well and early, we think that if there is any risk of the technology being used wrong, it's probably more so because there wasn't enough education on how to properly use it. So we're doing that by educating early, and then by keeping the technology within the company instead of outsourcing, we're mitigating the risk of potential corruption.
And what about sustainability-focused NGOs? Have they commented on this type of technology? Are they supportive of it, or are they still kind of critical in that you're not really reducing emissions as much as you are, capturing what's already out there? And obviously there's a benefit to doing that, but I think almost every NGO out there has something positive and negative to say about every different type of sustainability, project. So I'm curious if you'd heard any criticism of this type of technology in the market.
While we haven't seen direct criticism of this technology, we can assume due to in India especially, there's actually been quite a bit of litigation of e-NGOs versus concrete and developers due to their emissions, specifically cited due to their use of concrete. So we believe by any use to diminish this emissions directly from concrete, we would see e-NGOs probably quite supportive since they've already been targeting the use of cement and how its negative externalities.
Well, it actually it reduces some of the current emissions that are already in the air. So when we're capturing it, we're taking away from emissions that have already been released perhaps by your company or by other companies. So this is reducing those number and permanently locking it, as Braden said, like even if you wish to demolish your buildings, you're not putting that pollution back into the air. It's a permanent solution.
Yeah, it's always give and take because you have to continue to build, and
Yeah.
with cement you're going to get emissions. Like this doesn't completely erase emissions, but it's all about how we can continue to meet the demands of people. They deserve housing, they need housing, but how can we do it in a more sustainable fashion so that while we're building them a home, we're not destroying the river and forest around it. So.
I've got a quick one. I know in the United States, when you're doing reconstruction or demolition, concrete is hazardous material. Does this change the hazmat status of this new style of concrete?
Well, it doesn't change any of the existing characteristics of concrete because at the end of the day, we're still dealing with concrete as itself. We are reducing any potential emissions by making it part of the concrete. So it makes it a part of it and we don't have to risk it going back in. So we're reducing that potential externality.
So,
Okay,
so if you're demoing a building at the in 10 years when its useful life is over, you're not releasing it?
No, there's no
That's
re-releasing it.
So it doesn't make it
Permanently
more hazardous in terms of,
Yeah.
when you're breathing it in and stuff like you said in the States, it doesn't mitigate that, but it won't release the emissions back in the atmosphere.
So our,
Yeah.
what we have to pay to get it demolished is unaffected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's almost better for you, the more that you'll build with this, the more you'll actually be reducing emissions because you'll be capturing emissions that are already in the atmosphere.
But as you did say, this requires less concrete, so in theory,
Certainly.
we're reducing our future expense,
Yes. Reducing your,
demolition tax.
exactly. You're reducing your inputs, but you're getting the same output building size.
I'm just looking at what our timeline is here to make sure
We have
we're on
about 10 to
track.
15, we have around 15 for questions.
Questions.
We've kind of done that.
Yeah.
So now we get to tell them what we
Some
really think.
feedback. Yeah, I think it's time to
Sure.
move on to the feedback.
Okay.
I think you guys did a fabulous job. I really thank you. It was clear, it was easy to understand. I like some of the analogies that were used. You really hit, I'm looking at the judging form and all the different things. You guys hit on everything. I think you did a really good job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, absolutely. I'm going to reiterate, what you just said is you checked all the boxes. You had a great slide deck. A lot of times we get ones that just have a ton of words on it. It was very clear. You guys are very professional. I'd hire you for my team. You guys did an excellent job. I think you did a wonderful job.
And me being the lawyer in the room, honestly, I was thinking to myself, what kind of legal implications? And, I hadn't even thought of this idea that there's lawsuits against, from an environmental standpoint. So that's something that didn't even pop into my head. So great job thinking about that
was
angle
brilliant.
and finding
That was a really
it and
good one.
incorporating it because sometimes, that wasn't even immediately obvious to me.
So, so you guys had some nice depth in what you presented to us. As my colleagues have said, it wasn't just the surface level. You dove in a couple of spots of things that should matter
Certainly.
to us as a company. I think it was good that you brought up that we would not be an early adopter here because there's more risk
Yeah.
that we would financially project in
Yeah.
whether we do this or not.
Yeah.
So that's a real important thing. What my colleague also mentioned, stick to one currency throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd want to do that. There were actually a couple of slides, we're supposed to be a board of directors. So there are a couple of slides where I think you used the word their instead of your. So you may just want to go back and realize all your adjectives or whatever reflect that you were presenting to a board and not, a distant company, whatever. Let's see. So you guys actually, I would think about slowing you.
A tiny bit,
You,
I would
had
say.
you had 5 minutes
Yeah.
of extra room.
Yeah, sorry, I thought that was
I'm
the 1 minute.
sorry,
I was like,
no.
go,
And so
go,
I
go.
found there were a couple of
Sorry, that was
spots I
my
found
fault. I
myself
should've
like
told you.
Yeah,
furiously
sorry.
writing because I didn't want to.
Yeah.
Sorry, we
Yes.
sped up a bit.
But at the same time, I'm gonna kind of echo what my colleague said. I love the fact that you varied the slide formatting.
Yeah.
I wasn't looking at the same boilerplate template with just new stuff.
Mhm.
And by doing that, you capture the attention of the audience better
Yeah.
by varying, how it looks when we're looking in, so the slide variety. Last quick comment, I absolutely understand the technology, I understand the environmental implications. So I have background in what you're talking about here, and you did well.
Thank
you.
And I think your transition, you guys did a good job obviously practicing who was gonna say what, because your transitions among you were really good.
Thank you so much.
Again, I think the slightly fast, but not really a criticism other than just another, point to continue to improve and it's hard to do when you're presenting. I do the same thing, you tend to
You guys are
speed
big
up a
people.
little bit.
Have big goals.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so for instance, what I've done, what I presented in a time window, is I had just a little note sheet with a couple of timestamps.
Yeah.
It's like this slide by this point in time.
Yeah.
At maybe about 4 or 5 of those through your whole presentation, so that just tells you real time as you're going.
Yes.
And then you can do a little adjust or journal.
No, I do the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's very helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know if you guys did this when I was doing my MBA. I told the groups we would videotape ourselves, and the first reaction was, "Oh heck no!"
We did do that.
But then
Yeah,
once
you
we
guys
did
did great.
once we did it, everybody wanted a copy.
Mhm.
And the reason I bring that up, there were no stammers,
Mhm.
there were no or.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys,
You guys
your
did a great
presentation
job with
skills
Very
that.
well
Thank you.
rehearsed.
were
Thank you.
really awesome.
And great job on the fly in terms of responding to questions and knowing what slide to refer back to
Yeah, that was huge.
underscore your point. And it looks like you got a lot of appendix slides
Yeah.
kind of
We have a
being
lot more.
prepared.
We were prepared.
Being prepared, which is great.
Yes.
You guys did a fabulous job.
You could tell by the way you guys answered the questions, by the way you fielded the questions, you had done a lot of research.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you knew
Yeah.
your stuff, and
You could
you
go way
weren't
deeper.
thrown
Yeah.
by the questions, and that was really good. What did you guys think was the hardest part of this exercise?
Oh, for sure. Like, if you guys knew how many times we've rejigged this presentation,
Yeah, we
like,
redone the whole
Different
like
ones.
yesterday I think we redid the whole thing.
we're very well versed in business cases, but anything with an ethical or legal component, like we love the sustainability aspect we'd never done before. So
Okay.
storylining it so it had kind of the clear ethical implication off of the start, and then trying to find a good mix between the traditional business case and this where
Yeah,
it's,
that was
it's
very
kind of a different mix. It
we're
took a
used
lot
to
of
doing.
rejigging and representing
Yeah.
and
We're used to being told the case and then like analyzing it and stuff, so we had to change our tactics a bit. So that
You
was
did a good
a
job
learning
of
curve.
building it, and
Yeah.
I think identifying this underlying ethical risk of look, we've got to build housing. We can't.
Yeah.
It's not really an option
Yeah.
to say no,
No.
we're not going to build. And I think
No.
that's not a good business decision. It's not
Yeah.
a good ethical decision. Every company needs to grow, and people need
Yeah.
housing. So
Yeah.
we got to figure out the best way to do it.
yeah.
Yeah, I think key to what you guys just said,
Yeah.
you weren't reaching for the token or check the box by saying, okay, here's a slide on ethics, now we'll get back to
Yeah.
whatever. It was,
Yeah.
everything was folded
It
in
was
well.
it was genuine.
Yeah,
And
I
I think
know.
it was real and it was meaningful.
Yeah.
At every step of the
Yeah,
way.
we can tell that your company's not about like the greenwashing and
Yeah.
everything. So
we're still in character.
we really wanted to hone in on that, but
Yeah.
All right.
That's
Yeah.
great.
okay.
Oh, thank you so much.
Any
Yeah.
other
You did a great
questions
job,
for us?
yeah.
I guess anything else that we should have touched on in the ethical? I guess we're supposed to include more of that tomorrow
I
from
think,
your comments.
I think the ethical piece of it is maybe you can make it. I'm just trying to think of ideas to give
Yeah.
you suggestions to kind of to underscore that. Maybe you kind of make it personal to the people in the room.
Yeah.
Say, I know you know, want I'm just trying, I can't think of it off the top of my head, but just kind of a way to make it a little bit more personal, because
Yeah.
housing is personal.
Yeah, and like your
And it's
kids and your
important.
grandkids
Yeah,
will
like
have a good
I know
future.
that
Yeah.
you, and if you're talking to people, if we're the board that lives in India, and I don't
Yeah.
know if really we were supposed to be living in India, but your neighbors,
Certainly.
your families,
Yeah.
they need places to live,
Mhm.
and I know that you understand your ethical responsibility to provide housing for your country.
Yeah.
So maybe you can kind of make it a little bit more personal like that.
That's good. Your neighbors need places to live, but so do
Yeah.
your grandkids.
Yeah.
And your grandkids and your great
Well,
grandkids.
so
Yeah.
it's a huge
Yeah.
news item in this country. That is the remediation costs of black mold in older housing,
Certainly.
where that wasn't even thought about, and now people are
Yeah.
spending tens or
Yeah.
hundreds of thousands of dollars
Yeah.
to rebuild the houses they live in.
Yeah.
Or
To get-
asbestos.
And
Yeah.
asbestos.
If you want to
Yeah.
tear down an old building or an old
Yeah.
house,
It's
it becomes
better
a
just to
thing.
put an envelope over it and leave.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I can't really think of
Okay.
any other way to approach the ethics.
Yeah, I think you did a good job of highlighting it up front,
Yeah.
and that you it is ethical, in terms
Yeah.
of and then I think you asked a good question, like, what if we just do nothing? Why do
Yeah.
we need to do this at
Yeah.
all? And I
Yes.
Yeah.
think that's a good question, and I think that's where you have an opportunity to underscore. You're a company that you said this. You advertise and you support ethics and
Yeah.
sustainability in your marketing, and you wanna live up to
Stay true to- yeah.
stay true to your name.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
So while you
Yeah.
mentioned that we are maybe on the leading edge, or we have really solid
Mm-hmm.
ethical and sustainability practices as it is,
Mm-hmm.
there's a global level of wanting to improve on that.
Certainly.
This will help this company stay ahead of any competition
Yeah.
Right.
that wants to jump in and say, well, look at us now.
Exactly.
And that's a good business point.
Yeah, as you said, recognizing the build less, we did we thought of that, and we feel like that's so common now. Everyone's like, oh, just stop building, stop producing, stop. Like
Yeah,
same
it's
with
not-
GDP, like
we
just
can't-
stop. But
Or
like
there's
it's not
refurbishment.
realistic.
I
Yeah.
think another way to look at housing is refurbishment of
Yeah.
existing housing, and so
Exactly.
that if you got something that's more dilapidated, you can
For sure.
invest in making that a nicer building, and but that's not necessarily growing the units. I think that's making better. Nicer
Yeah. Right.
housing for people, but it's not really addressing the
Growing
population
to,
growth.
yeah.
That's what we get frustrated so much with sustainability is
Yeah.
there seems to be this underlying thing of just consume less, and it's like
Yeah.
we're humans,
Yeah.
like
It's
we're
not
business people, we know that
feasible,
like
like,
people aren't
yeah.
going to necessarily consume
Yeah.
less,
Well,
so how can we move
and as the
forward?
population grows, like even
It's
if
not. Yeah.
individually we consume less, we're still generally consuming
Right.
more. So
Exactly.
it's not an
Yeah.
option.
It's
So,
such a
so
common
under the guise
answer.
of a SWOT analysis, the fact that we are leading edge and this is gonna keep
Yeah.
us even on that leading edge, is an opportunity that
Very strong
it
opportunity,
definitely is
yeah.
a solid, even if the profitability of it
Yeah.
or the expense of whatever is marginal, like I initially questioned, just that alone has tangibility.
Yeah.
And I think they're
Exactly.
I think, I asked the question and you answered it right, but I think maybe even underscore more the fact that I think you're gonna win bids with this technology.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
I
Certainly.
think, especially government buildings,
Exactly.
when you
Well,
can
a
you
great
can
point.
demonstrate that
Yeah.
you have a technology that reduces carbon emissions, governments are gonna favor that technology.
Yeah.
And as population
Yeah.
expands, as you mentioned,
Yeah.
there has to be government
There's
infrastructure.
gonna be government housing, there's
Exactly.
So
gonna
you
be
almost have
government-
a known customer
Mhm.
Yeah.
going forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, and on the financial aspect, you're also avoiding like those carbon taxes
Right.
that are coming
Yeah.
in too, which
Yeah.
saves you. Like if you did continue the way you are, you would be faced
Yeah.
with those.
No,
Okay, last quick one. Did you guys consider at all Indian culture and values versus Western culture and values?
That's a good one.
In the things you talked about?
Certainly.
So we, at the end of the day, we considered it in the aspect of looking at that population growth and that ethical dilemma. Everyone wants somewhere to live, regardless of your cultural differences. Everyone wants somewhere safe to live. So how can we provide that? And especially looking based on their corporate culture and their company's culture, they clearly have an emphasis on sustainability and ethics in everything they do. So how can we marry that with just the human culture of wanting a home?
Yeah, because that's the tough, I guess we were supposed to be an American version of that company. That always confuses me. But if you're actually trying to present, assuming that we're from India,
Certainly.
then the hidden element you at least want to know about is the societal value differences.
Certainly.
Like something, because you might want to lean on what you know, obviously, right?
Exactly.
So there's a site, I've done international business and contracting, and there's a website that's been around forever that I still go back to, the Gear Hofstede site. So I could give you, they have an app for it, I could give you guys the name of the app.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah.
It's not gonna, I mean, you guys are solid, don't try and last minute change too much.
Okay.
But just if you ever have to do this again, like when I was traveling to say Norway, to understand some of the differences. Key cook example, when I went to Saudi Arabia, it was like, do not extend your left hand to shake their hand.
Yeah, there's a lot of.
When you go to Mexico, they're gonna wanna talk about your family first before you get into business.
And I work for a Japanese company, and I've learned a lot about Japanese.
When I traveled to
Very
Japan on
different.
business, do not stick one hand out to receive their business card.
Yeah.
You take,
And
put
don't
two
put it
hands
in your
out.
back pocket.
Yeah.
And don't put it
Never
in
do
your
that.
pocket. You've insulted them right off the bat.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the kind of thing that stuff like this would
Okay.
steer you towards.
That'd be amazing, yeah.
Cool.
Thank you.
We're gonna get a
Uh-oh,
picture.
where's makeup?
Nice.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think our